The rope coiled like a rattlesnake at her feet, and Molly Anderson knew she was doing something wrong, but the stubbornness her father had always cursed refused to let her quit. The afternoon sun beat down on the empty corral behind her late uncle's ranch house in Provo, Utah, turning the dust golden and her white blouse damp with sweat. But she threw the lasso again anyway, watching it fall in another useless heap 6 feet from the fence post she had been aiming at for the past 2 hours. It was September 1882, and Molly had arrived in Provo 3 weeks ago to settle her Uncle Thomas's estate after he died of pneumonia that previous winter. The lawyer in town had explained that the small ranch was hers now, along with its debts and its 30 head of cattle that needed proper tending before the season turned. At 22 years old, Molly had left her life as a seamstress in Philadelphia, traded her city dresses for practical skirts and boots, and decided that if she was going to survive out here in the Utah Territory, she needed to learn the skills that mattered. Roping was one of them. She gathered the hemp rope again, feeling the rough fibers bite into her palms. Her hands were already blistered and red, but she ignored the sting. The books she had found in her uncle's study showed diagrams of loops and throws, but translating those drawings into actual motion proved far more difficult than she had imagined. She tried to remember the stance the illustration had shown: feet apart, arm back. But when she threw, the loop collapsed again before it even left her hand. "Hell," she muttered, then glanced around to make sure nobody had heard her curse. The ranch sat a mile outside town, surrounded by scrubland and mountains that rose purple in the distance, so she was alone with her frustration. She picked up the rope again. That was when she heard the horse approaching. Molly turned, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw a rider coming up the dusty path from the main road. He sat tall in the saddle, and even from a distance she could tell he was watching her. She felt her cheeks flush, embarrassed to be caught failing so spectacularly at something children probably learned before they were 10 years old. The rider stopped at the corral fence and dismounted in one smooth motion. He was tall, with dark hair that needed cutting, and eyes the color of creek water in summer. He wore a dusty brown vest over a blue shirt, weathered chaps, and a hat that had seen better days. Everything about him said cowboy, from his boots to the way he looped his horse's reins over the fence rail without looking. "Afternoon," he said, his voice carrying easily across the corral. "Name is Vincent Calloway. I worked for your uncle before he passed. Heard Thomas's niece had come to take over the place, and I wanted to pay my respects, see if you needed any help getting things in order." Molly walked toward him, still holding the rope. Up close, she could see he was maybe 26 or 27, with a face that was handsome in a rough way, weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were kind, though, and that mattered more than anything else. "Molly Anderson," she said, extending her hand. His grip was warm and calloused. "I appreciate you coming by. Uncle Thomas never mentioned much about the ranch in his letters, so everything here is new to me." Vincent nodded toward the rope in her other hand. "Looks like you were teaching yourself to rope." "Trying to," Molly admitted. "Not having much success, as you probably saw." "Mind if I watch you throw a few more times? Might be able to spot what is giving you trouble." She hesitated, pride warring with practicality, but practicality won. "I would appreciate that. I have been at this for hours, and I cannot figure out what I am doing wrong." Molly walked back to her position, shook out the rope, and tried again. The loop formed, but when she threw, it twisted and fell short. She heard Vincent make a thoughtful sound. "Again," he called. She threw 5 more times, each attempt ending in failure. Finally, Vincent climbed over the fence and walked toward her, his boots raising small puffs of dust with each step. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the rope. She handed it to him, watching as he checked the length, tested the weight, and then coiled it properly in his left hand. He built a loop that looked perfect, the Honda positioned just right, and she realized immediately that hers had been too small. "First thing," Vincent said, his voice patient, "your loop needs to be bigger. You have been making them about half the size they should be. See?" He held it up so she could see the diameter. "That gives you a much better chance of catching whatever you were aiming at." Molly nodded, studying the loop carefully. "Yep, second thing is your stance. You have been standing too square. You want your left foot forward if you are right-handed, weight balanced." He demonstrated, and she noticed how natural he looked, like the rope was an extension of his arm. "And you are gripping too tight with your throwing hand. It needs to be firm, but not strangled. The rope has to be able to slide through your fingers smooth. He handed the rope back to her. Now you try, build the loop first. Molly worked the rope, making the loop bigger this time. It felt awkward, too large, but she trusted his judgment. Vincent stepped behind her, close enough that she could smell leather and sage and something clean like soap. "May I?" he asked again, and when she nodded, he placed his hands lightly over hers, guiding her fingers to the right position. "Feel how loose that is? That is what you want. Now, adjust your stance." She shifted her left foot forward, and he nodded with approval. "Good. Now, when you throw, it is all in the wrist and the follow-through. You have been stopping your arm too soon, right here." He touched her right shoulder gently. "Let your arm extend all the way. Imagine you are reaching for what you want to catch." Molly took a breath and threw. The loop sailed through the air, spinning open, and actually dropped over the fence post. It was not a perfect throw. The loop landed crooked and barely caught the top, but it caught. "I did it!" The words burst out of her before she could stop them, and she turned to Vincent with a smile so wide it hurt her cheeks. His face broke into a grin. "That you did. That was real good for your first proper throw. It felt different. I could feel it working right. That is the trick. Once your body knows what it is supposed to do, everything gets easier." He walked over and retrieved the rope from the post, bringing it back to her. "Try again. Repetition is what makes it stick." They spent the next hour in the corral, with Vincent coaching her through throw after throw. He corrected her grip when it got too tight, reminded her about her stance when she forgot and squared up, and praised her whenever she made progress. By the time the sun started dropping toward the mountains, Molly could catch the fence post about half the time, and her arms ached from shoulder to fingertip. "That is enough for today," Vincent said, taking the rope and coiling it properly. "You keep practicing like this. You will be roping cattle by spring." "I need to be able to do it before spring," Molly said, accepting the coiled rope from him. "The cattle need to be rounded up and checked before winter, do they not? The lawyer said something about making sure they are all accounted for and healthy." Vincent nodded slowly. "That is true. Usually happens in October, before the weather turns. I could help with that if you want. Your uncle and I had an arrangement. I have got a small place about 3 miles north, but I hired on here during busy seasons. Could do the same for you, if you are interested." The offer was practical, and Molly knew she needed the help. But something about the way he looked at her made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with hard work or business arrangements. She pushed the feeling aside. She had not come to Utah to get tangled up with a cowboy. She had come to build a life for herself, to prove she could manage on her own. "I cannot pay much," she said honestly. "The ranch is not exactly profitable right now." "Same terms your uncle and I had will work fine. I am not looking to get rich, just like staying busy." He smiled, and there was something warm in his expression that made her stomach flutter. "Besides, hate to see all that roping practice go to waste." "All right then, when would you want to start?" "How about tomorrow morning? I can show you around the property, let you know what needs doing before winter. Then we can work on your roping some more in the afternoon." "That sounds good." Vincent untied his horse and swung into the saddle with easy grace. "See you at sunrise, Miss Anderson." "Molly," she corrected. "Just Molly." "All right then, Molly." The way he said her name felt intimate somehow, like they had known each other longer than an hour. "Sleep well." She watched him ride away, sitting still and easy in the saddle, until he disappeared around a bend in the road. Then she looked down at the rope in her hands, at her blistered palms and dusty skirts, and smiled. For the first time since arriving in Provo, she felt like maybe she could actually make this work. That night, Molly soaked her hands in cool water and made herself a simple supper of beans and bread. The ranch house was small, just 3 rooms, but it was solid and well built. Her uncle had been a bachelor all his life, and the place had the sparse feeling of a man who had lived alone, but Molly had started adding small touches: curtains for the windows, wild flowers in a jar on the table, a quilt her mother had made draped over the back of the rocking chair. She thought about Vincent as she ate, about his patience and the gentle way he had corrected her mistakes without making her feel stupid. Most men she had known in Philadelphia would have laughed at a woman trying to learn ranch work, would have told her to stick to sewing and cooking and leave the real work to them. Vincent had not done that. He had treated her like someone worth teaching, someone who could learn if given proper instruction. She flexed her sore fingers and smiled. Tomorrow, she would do even better. Vincent arrived just as the sun crested the mountains, turning the sky pink and gold. Molly had been up for an hour already, feeding the chickens and checking on the 2 milk cows her uncle had kept near the barn. She had braided her dark hair and pinned it up tight, dressed in her most practical skirt and a shirt she had borrowed from her uncle's trunk. "Morning," Vincent called, dismounting. "You are an early riser." Force of habit, the dress shop in Philadelphia opened at 7, and I had to be there at 6 to get everything ready. She walked over to meet him. "I made coffee if you want some." "That sounds real good." They sat on the porch steps, drinking coffee and watching the morning light spread across the scrubland. Molly found it surprisingly easy to be quiet with him. No need to fill every moment with chatter. He seemed comfortable with silence too, just sitting and sipping and taking in the day. "Your uncle was a good man," Vincent said eventually. "Fair and honest, taught me a lot about running cattle in this country when I first came out here." "Where are you from originally?" "Missouri. Came west when I was 18, looking for work and adventure. Found plenty of both." He glanced at her. "What made you decide to stay and run the place instead of selling it?" Molly considered the question, wrapping both hands around her warm cup. "I was tired of Philadelphia, I think. Tired of making dresses for rich women and living in a boarding house and feeling like I was just going through the motions of a life instead of actually living one. When the lawyer wrote to tell me about the inheritance, it felt like a sign, a chance to do something different, something real. Ranching is definitely real," Vincent said with a slight smile. "Hard work, long hours, and the weather does not care about your plans. But there is something good about it too. Building something, taking care of animals and land, seeing the results of your effort. That is what I want. To build something that is mine." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Then let me show you what you are working with." They spent the morning riding the boundaries of the ranch, Vincent pointing out landmarks and explaining the layout. The property was about 400 acres, he told her, most of it grazing land with decent water from a creek that ran year-round. The cattle were scattered across the eastern section, and they would need to round them up systematically to count them and check for any injuries or illness. "Your uncle usually hired on 2 or 3 extra hands for the roundup," Vincent said as they paused on a rise overlooking a small valley. "But if it is just you and me, we can do it. Just take us longer." "I do not mind working hard." "No, I can see that." He looked at her with something like respect. "Takes dedication to stand in a corral for 2 hours, teaching yourself something most people would not even attempt." The compliment warmed her more than the morning sun. "My father always said I was too stubborn for my own good." "Stubborn can be useful out here. It is what keeps you going when things get difficult." They rode back to the ranch house for a quick meal of cold chicken and biscuits. Then Vincent suggested they work on her roping again. This time, he set up 3 different posts at varying distances and heights. "Real cattle are not going to stand still like that fence post," he explained. "So you need to practice different angles and distances. Start with the closest one and work your way back." Molly worked for 2 hours, and this time her progress was faster. Her muscles remembered the motion from yesterday, and Vincent's patient corrections helped her refine the technique. By the time they stopped for water, she could catch the middle post consistently and the closest one almost every time. "That is impressive," Vincent said, handing her a canteen. "You have got natural timing. Some people never develop that feel for when to release." "I keep thinking about it like sewing," Molly admitted. "There is a rhythm to it, a moment when everything lines up just right. Roping feels similar somehow." "That is smart thinking." He took a drink from his own canteen, and Molly found herself watching the strong line of his throat, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. She looked away quickly, feeling heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. They worked until evening, and Vincent showed her how to care for the rope properly, how to coil it so it would not tangle, and how to check for weak spots that might break under stress. His hands moved with practiced confidence, and Molly caught herself staring more than once. "You are a good teacher," she said, as they walked toward the barn to feed the horses. "Patient. You are a good student, focused and determined. That dedication is what makes the difference." He looked at her directly, holding her gaze. "Not everyone would work this hard to learn something new. Most people give up after the first frustration. I cannot afford to give up. This ranch is my future now. It is a good future if you want it. The land here is solid, and there is room to grow if you manage things right." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I meant what I said about helping. I like it here, and your uncle was good to me. Be happy to see the place thrive. Thank you, Vincent, truly. He smiled, and the warmth in his eyes made her breath catch. Tomorrow we start rounding up those cattle. Better get some rest. After he left, Molly stood in the corral for a long moment, watching the sun set over the mountains and feeling something shift inside her chest. She was not sure what it was, this feeling that made her heart beat faster when Vincent smiled, that made her aware of every place his hand had touched hers when correcting her grip. She told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural warmth of friendship developing. But deep down, she knew it was more than that. The cattle roundup began the next morning and proved to be every bit as hard as Vincent had warned. They started in the eastern section, riding slowly through brush and rocks, looking for the distinctive brands that marked her uncle's animals. The cattle were half wild after months of ranging free, and they scattered at the first sight of riders. We need to move slow, Vincent called to her as they worked. Push them gentle toward the creek bed. They will bunch up there naturally. Molly followed his lead, learning to read the animals' movements, to anticipate where they would try to break away. Her roping skills were not good enough yet to catch anything moving, but Vincent handled those situations with smooth expertise, his lasso flying true every time. By noon, they had gathered 15 head and guided them into a temporary pen near the barn. Both of them were covered in dust and sweat, but Vincent was grinning. That is a good morning's work. If we keep this pace, we will have them all rounded up in about a week. Only a week, Molly groaned theatrically, stretching her sore back. I think I have discovered muscles I did not know I had. Vincent laughed, and the sound was rich and genuine. You will get used to it. Give it a few days, and you will be moving easier. They worked through lunch, checking each captured cow carefully. Vincent showed Molly how to spot signs of illness, how to check hooves and eyes and coat condition. 2 of the animals had minor injuries that needed tending, and he talked her through the treatment process with the same patient instruction he used for everything else. You have got a gentle touch, he observed as she cleaned a scrape on a young steer's leg. Animals can tell when someone is trying to help versus when they are scared or angry. I always liked animals. We had a cat in Philadelphia, but the landlady made me get rid of it. Molly finished wrapping the wound with clean cloth. I missed having something to care for. Well, you have got 30 cows to care for now, maybe more once we finish counting. That evening, instead of Vincent leaving right away, Molly invited him to stay for supper. It seemed silly for him to ride 3 miles home when she had stew simmering and plenty to share. He accepted, and they sat at her small table eating and talking about the ranch, about the work ahead, about nothing and everything. Tell me about Missouri, Molly said, curious about his life before Utah. What was it like growing up there? Flat and green and humid, nothing like this country. Vincent tore off a piece of bread. My father had a small farm, grew corn and raised hogs. It was good land, but there were 7 of us kids and not enough to go around. I was the youngest son, so there would not be anything for me to inherit. Figured I better head out and make my own way. Do you miss your family? Sometimes, but I found something out here I did not have back home. Freedom, I guess. Space to become whoever I wanted to be instead of just being the youngest Calloway boy. He smiled at her. What about you? You miss Philadelphia? Not as much as I thought I would. I miss my mother, but she died 2 years ago. My father and I never got along well. He wanted me to marry a store clerk he knew, settle down, have babies. Safe and respectable. She paused, remembering the arguments, the disappointment in her father's eyes when she refused. When I told him I was coming to Utah to run a ranch, he said I was throwing my life away. Said I would be back within 6 months, begging him to help. Sounds like you have got something to prove. Maybe, or maybe I just want to live my own life on my own terms. Vincent raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. I will drink to that. They continued talking long after the meal was finished, and Molly realized with surprise that it was full dark outside. Vincent noticed at the same time and stood reluctantly. I should head home. Gotta be here early again tomorrow. Same time? Molly walked him to the door. Same time. He paused on the threshold, turning back to look at her. In the lamplight, his eyes were dark and soft. I am glad you decided to stay, Molly. Your uncle would be proud of how hard you were working. Thank you for helping me. I could not do this without you. Yes, you could. You are stronger than you know. He settled his hat on his head. "See you in the morning." She watched him ride away into the darkness, then closed the door and leaned against it, her heart doing strange things in her chest. She was starting to look forward to mornings not just because of the work or the learning, but because of the way Vincent smiled at her, the sound of his laugh, the feeling of rightness when they worked side by side. This was dangerous, she told herself. She had come here to build an independent life, not to fall for the first handsome cowboy who showed her kindness. But as she cleaned the dishes and prepared for bed, she could not stop thinking about him, could not stop replaying their conversations, the moments when their hands had brushed, or their eyes had met and held for just a second too long. The week of roundup passed in a blur of hard work and growing connection. Every day Molly and Vincent rode out together, gathering cattle and checking their health. Every evening they shared a meal and talked, the conversation flowing easily between them. Molly learned about his dreams of someday owning a bigger spread, about his love of this harsh, beautiful country, about the time he had broken his leg in 3 places and had to set it himself because he was 2 days' ride from the nearest doctor. She told him about her life in Philadelphia, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with needle and thread, about her mother's gentle wisdom and her father's rigid expectations. She told him things she had never shared with anyone, and he listened without judgment, his steady presence making her feel safe in a way she had not felt in years. By the end of the week, they had accounted for 32 head of cattle, all in decent health. Vincent declared the roundup a success and suggested they celebrate with a trip into Provo for supplies and maybe a meal at the hotel restaurant. "You have been working so hard, you deserve a break," he said. "Besides, you need to meet some of the other ranchers in the area. Good to have neighbors you can count on." Molly agreed, though the prospect of meeting strangers made her nervous. She changed into her best dress, a simple green calico that brought out the hazel in her eyes, and braided her hair into a crown around her head. When Vincent arrived to collect her in a small wagon, his eyes widened appreciatively. "You look real nice," he said, and the compliment made her blush. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." He did. He had shaved and put on a clean shirt the color of cream, and without the layer of dust he usually wore, she could see the clean lines of his face, the strong jaw, and the small scar above his left eyebrow that she wanted to ask about. The ride into Provo took about 30 minutes, and they talked easily the whole way. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with shops and businesses. Vincent drove them to the general store first, and Molly stocked up on supplies while he chatted with the owner, a round-faced man named Peterson, who had apparently known her uncle well. "Thomas spoke of you often," Peterson said, shaking her hand warmly. "Said you were smart as a whip and too independent for your own good. Meant it as a compliment, I think." Molly laughed. "That sounds like Uncle Thomas." They loaded the supplies into the wagon, then walked to the hotel. The restaurant there was plain but clean, with checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasting meat. Several other diners were already eating, and a few of them called greetings to Vincent. Over dinner, Vincent introduced her to John Marsh and his wife Sarah, who ran a larger spread about 10 miles south. They were friendly and welcoming, asking about her plans for the ranch and offering advice about winter preparation. "You will want to make sure you have enough hay laid by," Sarah said. She was a sturdy woman in her 40s with kind eyes and capable hands. "The winters here can be harsh, and you cannot count on the cattle finding enough forage on their own." "Vincent has been helping me figure all that out," Molly said. "I am lucky he agreed to stay on." John Marsh gave Vincent a knowing look. "I bet he is happy to help. Thomas always said his niece was a beauty, and he was not wrong." Molly felt her cheeks heat, but Vincent just smiled easily. "Miss Anderson is a hard worker and a quick learner. The ranch is in good hands." They talked for another hour, and by the time they left, Molly felt more connected to the community, less like an outsider trying to fit in. The Marshes had invited her to a barn dance the following month, and several other ranchers had promised to stop by if she needed help with anything. The ride home was quiet, both of them tired from the long day. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the landscape and making everything look magical and strange. Molly found herself intensely aware of Vincent beside her, the warmth of his body in the cool evening air, the way his hands held the reins with relaxed confidence. "Thank you for today," she said softly, "for introducing me around. It means a lot. People out here look after each other. It is how we survive." He glanced at her. Besides, I wanted them to know you are part of the community now, that you are not just passing through. I am not. This is home now. Good. The single word held a weight of meaning, and when Vincent pulled the wagon up to her house and helped her down, his hand stayed on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. Molly looked up at him, at his face in the moonlight, and felt her breath catch. "Vincent," she started, not sure what she wanted to say. He seemed to struggle with something internal, then stepped back, releasing her. "I should help you unload these supplies." The moment broke, and Molly felt a rush of confusion and disappointment. Had she imagined the connection between them? Was she reading things into his kindness that were not there? They worked in silence, carrying sacks and boxes into the house. When everything was unloaded, Vincent moved toward his horse, and Molly felt panic rise in her chest. She did not want him to leave, not like this, with this strange tension between them. "Will you come by tomorrow?" she asked. He paused, his back to her. "Do you want me to?" "Yes, I do." Vincent turned, and even in the darkness, she could see the intensity in his expression. "I will be here, same as always." After he left, Molly stood on her porch for a long time, staring at the star-filled sky and trying to understand the tangled feelings inside her. She was drawn to Vincent in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. She had not come to Utah looking for love, had not expected to find someone who made her heart race and her thoughts scatter. But she could not deny what she felt, could not pretend that every moment with him did not matter more than it should. The question was whether he felt the same way, or if she was just a responsibility to him, another job to complete. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent came by most mornings, and they worked on various ranch projects together. He taught her how to repair fences, how to maintain the barn, how to predict weather by watching the sky and the animals. Her roping continued to improve, and by mid-October, she could catch a moving target about half the time. "That is real good progress," Vincent said, watching her snag a fence post from horseback. "You have got the fundamentals down solid now. The rest is just practice." Molly coiled the rope, feeling proud of herself. "I could not have learned this without you. Your patience and your teaching made all the difference. Your dedication is what made the difference. I just pointed you in the right direction." He rode closer, and their horses stood side by side. "You should be proud of what you have accomplished. You came here not knowing anything about ranching, and now look at you, riding, roping, managing cattle. Your uncle would be amazed." The praise warmed her from the inside out. "Do you really think so?" "I know so. You are tougher than most men I have worked with, and you have got more determination in your little finger than some people have in their whole body." His voice was soft, almost tender. "You are something special, Molly Anderson." Their eyes met and held, and Molly felt the world narrow down to just the two of them, sitting on horseback in the October sun with the mountains rising purple in the distance. She wanted to say something, to tell him that he was special too, that these weeks working beside him had been the happiest of her life, but the words stuck in her throat. Vincent looked away first, clearing his throat. "We should check on those cattle in the north pasture, make sure they are still all accounted for." They rode together, the moment passed but not forgotten. Molly could feel it hanging between them, this unspoken thing that grew stronger every day. She caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she was not looking, saw something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. But he never said anything, never crossed the invisible line he seemed to have drawn. She wondered if it was because of the difference in their situations. She was a property owner, however small, and he was a hired hand. Maybe he thought she would not be interested in someone like him, or maybe he was worried about complicating their working relationship. The thought frustrated her. She did not care about social positions or what was proper. She cared about the way he made her laugh, the way he treated her as an equal, the way her whole day brightened when she saw him riding up the path. That evening, Molly made a decision. She was tired of dancing around her feelings, tired of wondering. At the very least, she needed to know if she was imagining the connection between them. After supper, as Vincent was preparing to leave, she caught his arm. "Wait, I need to ask you something." He turned, questioning. "What is it? Do you ever?" She faltered, suddenly unsure. "That is, I was wondering if you might want to come with me to the barn dance the Marshes are hosting next week, as my escort." Vincent's expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for her to read. "Molly, I do not know if that is a good idea." Why not? She tried to keep her voice steady, but hurt bled through. We are friends, are we not? It would just be two friends going to a dance together. Is that what we are? Friends? He looked at her intently. Because I have been trying real hard to keep things that way, but it is getting more difficult every day. Her heart started to pound. What do you mean? Vincent took off his hat and ran a hand through his hair, agitated. I mean that I think about you all the time. I mean that I look forward to coming here every morning more than anything else in my life. I mean that working beside you, teaching you, watching you master things that are difficult, it makes me happy in a way I have not been happy in years. He paused. I mean that I am falling for you, and I have been trying not to because I did not think it was appropriate. You are my employer, and I am just a ranch hand, and I did not want to make things complicated. Molly felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of relief and joy. You are not just a ranch hand. You are the man who believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You are the man who taught me that I could be strong and capable. You are the man I think about constantly, who makes every day better just by being in it. Molly. Her name was a whisper, a prayer. I am falling for you too, Vincent. I tried not to, but I cannot help it. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame her face. Can I kiss you? Please. His lips met hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. Molly had been kissed before, but never like this, never with this feeling of rightness, of coming home. She wound her arms around his neck, and he pulled her closer, and for a perfect moment, nothing else existed but the two of them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for weeks. Me too. She laughed, giddy with happiness. So, you will come to the dance with me? I will go anywhere with you. They kissed again, slower this time, exploring. When Vincent finally left that night, Molly floated through her evening chores in a daze of happiness. He cared about her. He was falling for her. All the signs she had noticed, the tension she had felt, it was all real. She slept better that night than she had in months. The week before the barn dance was the happiest of Molly's life. Vincent still came by every morning, but now he greeted her with a kiss, and they stole moments throughout the day to touch and talk and be close. He was careful not to push for more than she was ready to give, always respectful, always asking permission. She appreciated that about him, the way he valued her comfort and her choices. They talked about their future, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Vincent admitted that he had been saving money for years, hoping to buy his own place eventually. Molly suggested that perhaps they could expand her ranch together instead, make it into something bigger and better. I do not want you to think I am after your property, Vincent said seriously. That is not why I care about you. I know that, but if we are going to build a life together, we should do it as partners, equal partners. She took his hand. I need you, Vincent. Not just as a hired hand, but as someone who knows this life and can help me make the right decisions. Your experience and my determination, together we could make this ranch really thrive. Together, he repeated, testing the word. Then he smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made her heart flip. I like the sound of that. The night of the barn dance arrived cool and clear. Molly wore her green calico dress and the shawl her mother had crocheted, and Vincent showed up in pressed trousers and a vest that made him look impossibly handsome. The ride to the Marsh Ranch took an hour, and they spent it talking and laughing, his arm around her shoulders as she leaned against him in the wagon. The barn had been decorated with lanterns and autumn leaves, and at least 40 people were already there when they arrived. Music filled the air, a fiddle and guitar playing a lively tune, and couples swirled across the floor in an energetic reel. Sarah Marsh spotted them immediately and hurried over, beaming. Molly, Vincent, I am so glad you could make it, and I see you came together. Her eyes twinkled knowingly. We did, Molly confirmed, and Vincent squeezed her hand. They danced for hours, Vincent proving to be surprisingly graceful, despite his size. He whirled her through reels and square dances, held her close for the slower waltzes, and made her laugh with his commentary about the other dancers. John Marsh got overly enthusiastic during a particularly fast song, and nearly knocked over the refreshment table, and Sarah had to rescue the punch bowl while everyone laughed. During a break, they stepped outside for fresh air. The night was beautiful, stars scattered across the black sky like diamond dust. Vincent pulled Molly close, and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I have ever been." "Me too." He kissed the top of her head. "I never expected this, you know. Never expected to find someone who fit with me so perfectly." "We do fit, do not we?" She looked up at him. "It feels right, like this is exactly where I am supposed to be. I love you, Molly." The words were quiet but firm. "I know it has only been a few weeks, but I am sure. I love you." Joy exploded in her chest. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since you first fixed my roping technique and did not laugh at how terrible I was." He laughed, the sound rich and happy. "You were not terrible. You were determined. There is a difference." They kissed under the stars while music drifted from the barn, and Molly thought that she had never imagined her life could feel this complete, this right. All the risks she had taken, leaving Philadelphia, coming to Utah, deciding to run the ranch herself, all of it had led her to this moment, to this man. When they went back inside, several people commented on how well matched they looked, how nice it was to see two people so clearly happy together. The Marshes invited them for Sunday dinner, and other neighbors promised to help with winter preparations if they needed extra hands. The community was welcoming them not just as individuals, but as a couple, and that acceptance meant more to Molly than she could express. As they drove home in the early morning hours, Molly curled against Vincent's side and let herself imagine their future. A growing ranch, a home filled with love and laughter, maybe children someday. It was not the future she had envisioned when she left Philadelphia, but it was so much better than anything she could have planned. "What are you thinking about?" Vincent asked. "The future. Our future. What do you see?" "Everything," she said simply. "I see everything." Winter arrived in November, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Vincent moved his things to Molly's ranch, and they worked together to prepare for the harsh season. They spent long evenings by the fire, planning improvements for the spring and talking about their dreams. In December, Vincent rode into town and returned with a simple gold band. He proposed formally, down on one knee in their kitchen, his hands shaking slightly as he asked her to be his wife. "Yes," Molly said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, of course. Yes." They were married on a sunny day in January 1883, with the Marshes and a dozen other neighbors as witnesses. The ceremony was held in Molly's, now their small ranch house, with a traveling preacher officiating. Sarah Marsh had helped Molly sew a new dress, white cotton with lace at the collar, and she carried a small bouquet of dried wildflowers. Vincent wore his best suit, and when he looked at her walking toward him, his eyes shone with tears. They exchanged vows in voices thick with emotion, promising to love and support each other through whatever life brought. When the preacher pronounced them married, Vincent kissed her thoroughly, and their guests cheered and clapped. The celebration lasted into the night, with food and music and dancing. Molly felt like her heart might burst from happiness. This was her life now, this man, this ranch, this community. She had found her place in the world, and it was better than she ever could have dreamed. That first winter as a married couple was hard work, but deeply satisfying. They cared for the cattle together, repaired equipment, and made plans for expanding the herd in the spring. Vincent taught Molly more advanced ranching skills, and she continued to amaze him with how quickly she learned. "You are a natural at this," he said one afternoon, as she successfully delivered a difficult calf. "Like, you were born to ranch life." "I think I was born to live with purpose," Molly replied, washing her hands. "Back in Philadelphia, I was just existing. Here, with you, I am actually living." By spring, they had expanded their herd to 50 head and planted their first vegetable garden. Molly's roping skills had progressed to the point where she could work alongside Vincent as a true partner. And the neighboring ranchers often commented on how efficiently the Calloway ranch was run. That summer, Molly discovered she was pregnant. She was nervous to tell Vincent, worried he might insist she stop working so hard, but his reaction was pure joy. He lifted her off her feet and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating, as if he could not quite believe it. "A baby, Molly." "Are you happy?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "I am beyond happy. I am blessed." He did fuss over her more after that, but he did not try to stop her from working. He just adjusted their workload, taking on the heavier tasks and making sure she did not overexert herself. They continued to work side by side through the summer and fall, preparing for both winter and the new addition to their family. Their son was born in February 1884, during a snowstorm that kept the midwife, Sarah Marsh, with them for 3 days. The labor was long and difficult, and Vincent nearly wore a hole in the floor pacing. But when he finally held his son for the first time, a tiny red-faced bundle with a surprising amount of dark hair, his expression was one of pure wonder. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "Just perfect." They named him Thomas, after Molly's uncle, and he was indeed perfect. He had Vincent's eyes and Molly's stubborn determination, and from the beginning, he was happiest when he was outside watching the horses or listening to the sounds of ranch life. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch continued to grow, and Vincent and Molly became known as one of the most successful young couples in the area. They faced challenges, certainly. There were harsh winters, a summer drought in 1885 that tested everyone's resolve, and the constant hard work that ranching demanded. But they faced everything together, as true partners. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. When he was 3, Molly gave birth to twin girls, Emily and Grace, and the house suddenly felt wonderfully chaotic. Vincent was an amazing father, patient and loving, teaching his children the same way he had once taught Molly to rope. One evening in the summer of 1887, Molly stood on her porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red. Vincent came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. The children were playing in the yard, Thomas showing his sisters how to collect eggs from the hen house. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Vincent asked. "When I found you trying to teach yourself to rope?" Molly smiled, leaning back against him. "All the time. I was so frustrated and embarrassed. I had no idea that the man who stopped to help me would end up being my whole world." "I knew," Vincent said. "Not right away, but pretty quickly. I looked at you, all dusty and stubborn and refusing to quit, and I thought this woman is going to change my life. Did I? You gave me everything I never knew I wanted. A real home, a partner, a family." He turned her to face him. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Molly Calloway. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, too. You saw me when I could not see myself. You believed in me and taught me and loved me. You gave me this life. We gave each other this life." She kissed him, slow and sweet, tasting the coffee he had been drinking and the promise of years still to come. In the yard, Thomas called out that he had found a bird's nest, and the twins shrieked with delight. This was happiness, Molly thought. Not a single perfect moment, but a collection of ordinary days filled with work and love and purpose. It was teaching their son to rope the same way Vincent had once taught her, was watching their daughters chase chickens and laugh until they fell down. It was waking up every morning beside the man she loved and knowing that they had built something real and lasting together. The ranch continued to thrive. By 1890, they owned over 200 head of cattle and had hired on 2 permanent hands to help with the workload. Vincent's dream of owning a significant spread had come true, and Molly's determination to build something of her own had been fulfilled beyond her wildest expectations. They added rooms to the house as the children grew, and Molly planted roses by the porch that bloomed pink every summer. She sometimes thought about the seamstress she had been in Philadelphia, about the woman who had stood in a dusty corral with a rope at her feet, frustrated and alone. That woman seemed like someone from another lifetime, someone Molly barely recognized. Thomas grew tall and strong, helping his father with the cattle from the time he was 10. The twins, so different in personality, Emily quiet and thoughtful, while Grace was loud and fearless. Both learned to ride before they were 5. In 1891, Molly gave birth to another son, William, and their family felt complete. The children loved hearing the story of how their parents met. Thomas especially liked to pester his father for details, wanting to know everything about that first day. "Tell me again about how terrible Mother was at roping," he would say, grinning. "Your mother was not terrible," Vincent always corrected. "She was learning, and her dedication is what made her good. She never gave up, no matter how hard it got." "Like you taught her?" "Like we taught each other." Vincent would look at Molly across the table, and she would smile, remembering. "We were both learning, son, how to work together, how to trust each other, how to build something bigger than what we could do alone. As the children grew older, Vincent and Molly made sure to teach them all the skills they would need. Thomas became an expert roper, better even than his father. Emily showed a talent for handling the ranch accounts and planning ahead for market sales. Grace was fearless with animals, able to calm even the most skittish horse. And William, though still young, showed signs of inheriting his parents' stubbornness and determination. In 1895, when Thomas was 11, he asked his father to teach him advanced roping techniques. Vincent took him out to the same corral where he had first taught Molly, and she came to watch, leaning on the fence with baby William on her hip. "Remember to keep your loop big," Vincent instructed, his voice patient and encouraging, just as it had been all those years ago. "And do not grip too tight. Let the rope move through your fingers." Thomas practiced while Vincent coached, and Molly felt tears prick her eyes watching them. Her son was growing up so fast, becoming his own person. But he had the same work ethic she and Vincent shared, the same dedication to doing things right. "He is good," she said, when Vincent came over to stand beside her. "He had a good example. Watching you master roping taught him that anything can be learned if you are willing to work at it. We have done all right, have we not? With the ranch, with the children, with everything." Vincent kissed her temple. "We have done better than all right. We have built something amazing, and it all started because a stubborn woman decided to teach herself to rope instead of giving up, and because a patient man stopped to help her instead of riding by." They watched their son practice, the late afternoon sun turning everything golden. Molly thought about the journey that had brought her here, all the risks and fears and moments of doubt. Every single step had been worth it. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. There were difficult times, certainly. A bad winter in 1896 that they barely survived. Thomas's near-fatal riding accident in 1898 that had them both praying harder than they ever had before. The year the drought came again, and they had to make hard decisions about the herd. But there were so many more good times. Emily's wedding to a good man from town in 1902. Thomas deciding to stay on the ranch and build his life there, bringing home a sweet young woman named Helen in 1903. Grace announcing she wanted to train horses professionally, and Vincent supporting her, even though it was unusual for a woman. William showing a talent for breeding cattle and improving the herd quality. Molly and Vincent grew older together, their faces weathering like the wood of the ranch buildings, their hands becoming more gnarled and scarred from years of work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, built on decades of partnership and shared experiences. They celebrated their 20th anniversary in 1903 with all their children and grandchildren, Thomas and Helen having blessed them with a grandson the year before, around them. The house was full of noise and laughter, and Molly looked around at everything they had created and felt overwhelming gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Vincent asked, pulling her aside during the celebration. "That I am the luckiest woman alive. That somehow, miraculously, everything worked out better than I ever dreamed possible. It was not miraculous. It was work and love and determination. Mostly yours." He cupped her face gently. "You took a chance on coming here, on staying, on believing you could make a life in this hard country. And you did more than survive. You thrived. We thrived together." "Together," he agreed, and kissed her the way he had been kissing her for 20 years, with tenderness and passion and absolute commitment. As Molly looked around at her family, at the ranch building solid and well-maintained, at the life she and Vincent had built from nothing but hope and hard work, she remembered that first day in the corral. She remembered her frustration, her determination, her refusal to quit. She remembered Vincent's patience, his encouragement, his belief that she could succeed. And she remembered the moment when he had first told her she was dedicated, when he had praised her efforts instead of mocking them, when he had looked at her and seen not a city woman playing at ranching, but a person of worth and capability. That moment had changed everything. It had given her confidence when she had none, hope when she was discouraged, and eventually love that had sustained her through decades. All because a cowboy had stopped to help a woman teaching herself to rope, had seen her potential and helped her realize it. Their story was not unusual for the West. There were countless other couples who had built lives together through hard work and determination. But it was their story, uniquely theirs, and Molly would not have changed a single moment of it As the celebration continued around them, Vincent pulled Molly close and they danced in their kitchen. No music needed, just the rhythm of their hearts beating in sync after 20 years of loving each other. Their children and grandchildren watched and smiled, seeing in their parents what true partnership looked like, what real love meant. And in that moment, Molly Anderson Calloway knew that every risk she had taken, every fear she had faced, every moment of doubt and struggle had been worth it. Because it had brought her here, to this place, with this man, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built together. She had come to Utah alone and uncertain, hoping only to survive. Instead, she had found everything. She had found her strength, her purpose, her home, and her heart. And it had all begun with a rope and a cowboy who believed in her dedication. Years continued to unfold at the Calloway Ranch, each season bringing its own rhythm of work and celebration. By 1910, Vincent and Molly were in their 50s, their bodies showing the wear of decades of ranch work, but their spirits still strong. The ranch had grown to over 400 acres, with a herd that numbered close to 300. They employed 5 permanent hands and hired additional help during busy seasons. Thomas and Helen had given them 3 grandchildren now, and they lived in a house Vincent and Molly had helped them build just half a mile from the main ranch house. Emily and her husband had settled in Provo, where he ran a successful mercantile, and they visited often with their 2 children. Grace had indeed become a horse trainer, respected throughout Utah for her skill and patience with difficult animals. William, at 26, managed the cattle breeding program and had developed a reputation for producing strong, healthy stock. On a warm evening in June 1910, Molly and Vincent sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for nearly 30 years. Molly's hair was more gray than brown now, and Vincent's face was deeply lined, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love in this same spot. "Do you remember," Molly said, "when we used to sit here and dream about what the ranch could become? I remember you had bigger dreams than I did. You always saw the potential in things I thought were impossible. We did it together, every bit of it." Vincent reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. His hands were scarred and weathered, the hands of a working man, but to Molly they were beautiful. These were the hands that had taught her to rope, that had held her through joy and sorrow, that had built their life together board by board and day by day. "I have been thinking," Vincent said, "about maybe easing back a bit. Thomas is more than capable of running things, and the other hands are solid. We have earned some time to just enjoy what we built." "Are you saying you want to retire, Vincent Calloway?" "Not retire exactly, just slow down, spend more time with the grandchildren. Maybe travel a little, see some places we have always talked about, but never got around to visiting." Molly considered this. They had worked so hard for so long that the idea of slowing down felt strange. But she also knew Vincent was right. They had earned their rest, and there were things she wanted to do while they were still healthy enough to do them. "All right," she agreed. "We will talk to Thomas tomorrow, start transitioning things gradually." "You are sure?" "I am sure. We built something that will last long after we are gone. Our children and grandchildren will carry it forward. That was always the goal." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. Molly thought about the girl she had been when she first arrived in Utah, alone and scared, but determined to make something of herself. She had done that, and so much more. She had built a life beyond her wildest dreams, had loved and been loved completely, had raised children who were strong and capable and good. And it had all started because she refused to quit when things got hard, and because a cowboy named Vincent Calloway had stopped to help her and ended up staying forever. The transition of ranch management took several months, but by the fall of 1910, Thomas was running the day-to-day operations, with Vincent serving as an advisor. It was strange at first for both Vincent and Molly to step back from the constant work, but they adjusted. They spent more time with their grandchildren, teaching them the skills and stories they wanted to pass on. Molly taught the girls to sew and cook, while Vincent taught the boys to rope and ride. In the spring of 1911, they took their first real trip, traveling to San Francisco to see the ocean. Molly stood on the beach, feeling the salt spray on her face and marveling at the vast expanse of water, and thought about how far she had come from that dusty corral in Provo. "Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked, standing beside her. "Giving up your city life to come out to Utah?" "Not for a single second," Do you regret stopping that day to help me?" He pulled her close. "That was the best decision I ever made. Everything good in my life came from that moment." They returned to the ranch refreshed and ready to enjoy this new phase of their lives. Vincent spent his days working with the horses and advising Thomas on herd management. Molly kept a large garden and finally had time to pursue her interest in painting, setting up an easel on the porch and capturing the landscape she loved in watercolors. Their 50th anniversary in 1928 was a grand celebration. All their children and grandchildren gathered, along with neighbors and friends from throughout the valley. The ranch now spanned over 600 acres, with multiple houses for the extended family and a thriving operation that employed a dozen people year-round. At the party, Thomas stood to make a toast. He was 54 now, gray-haired and weathered like his father, but still strong and capable. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that anything worth having is worth working for, who showed us what real partnership looks like, who built something from nothing and gave us all a foundation to stand on. Thank you for your love, your dedication, and your example." Everyone drank, and then Emily stood. "Mother, Father, you showed us that strength comes in many forms. Mother, you came here alone and made yourself into a rancher through sheer determination. Father, you saw her potential and helped her realize it. Together, you built not just a ranch, but a family and a legacy that will last for generations." Grace added, "You taught us that love is not just words, but actions. It is showing up every day, working side by side, supporting each other through hard times, and celebrating the good ones." William finished, "Everything we have, everything we are, we owe to you. Thank you for being the best parents anyone could ask for." Molly was crying openly by the time they finished, and Vincent was not far behind. They stood together, and Vincent addressed their family. "Your mother and I have been blessed beyond measure. When we started out, we had no idea if we could make this work. But we believed in each other, and we did not quit when things got hard. That is the real secret to success in ranching, or in marriage, or in life. Find someone you trust, commit to them completely, and keep working together no matter what comes." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "We love all of you more than words can say. Seeing you all here, seeing how you have built your own lives and families, that is the greatest success we could ever have." The celebration lasted late into the night, with music and dancing and stories. Young and old gathered together, and Molly saw her legacy spread out before her. Multiple generations connected by blood and love and the land they all worked. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Molly and Vincent walked out to the old corral where it had all begun. The fence posts were different now, replaced multiple times over the decades, but the space was the same. Molly could almost see her younger self standing there with a rope at her feet, frustrated and determined. "I was so worried that day," she admitted. "Worried that I had made a terrible mistake coming here, that I would fail and prove my father right. But you did not fail. You succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, including your own. Because of you. Because you believed in me and taught me and loved me." Vincent shook his head. "I helped, but the strength was always yours, Molly. I just gave you the tools. You did the real work." They stood together in the moonlight, old and tired, but still deeply in love, still partners after nearly 50 years. And Molly knew that this moment of connection and reflection was the real treasure, not the land or the cattle or even the family. Though all those things mattered, the real treasure was the relationship they had built, the love that had sustained them through everything. "I would do it all again," she said softly. "Every hard day, every challenge, every moment. I would do it all again just to end up right here with you." "Me too," Vincent agreed and kissed her gently. "Me too." They walked back to the house, hand in hand, moving slowly but steadily, still together after all these years. And in the distance, the mountains rose dark against the stars, unchanging and eternal, witnesses to their love story that had begun with a rope and a cowboy's kindness and had grown into something beautiful and lasting. Vincent Calloway passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1932, just shy of his 76th birthday. Molly held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she was grateful they had been given so many years together, grateful that he went peacefully without pain or suffering. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, a testament to the life he had lived and the impact he had made. His children and grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren gathered to say goodbye to a man who had been the foundation of their family. Molly lived on at the ranch, surrounded by family, for another 12 years. She continued to paint and garden, told stories to her great-grandchildren about the old days, and always kept Vincent's memory alive. She never remarried, saying that she had found her partner and no one else could ever compare. She died in the spring of 1944, at the age of 84, sitting in her rocking chair on the porch where she and Vincent had spent so many evenings together. Her children found her with a smile on her face, and they knew she had gone to be with the man she loved. They buried her next to Vincent on a hill overlooking the ranch, beneath a stone that read, "Molly Anderson Calloway, 1860-1944, beloved wife, mother, and rancher. She never quit." The Calloway Ranch continued to thrive under Thomas and his descendants, growing and changing with the times, but always maintaining the values Vincent and Molly had instilled: hard work, dedication, partnership, and love. These were the principles they had lived by, and these were the principles that sustained the family through generations. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, the family members who lived on the ranch would swear they could see two figures standing in the old corral, a tall man teaching a determined woman to rope, their laughter carrying on the wind. It was just a story, of course, a romantic notion, but like all the best stories, it held a truth at its heart, the truth that love, real love, built on respect and partnership and commitment, never really dies. It just gets passed down, generation after generation, a legacy more valuable than land or money or anything else. Vincent and Molly's story began with a rope and ended with a legend, the legend of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who built something beautiful together, and who showed everyone who came after them what it truly meant to love and be loved. Their story was the story of the American West itself, a tale of hard work and determination, of challenges overcome and dreams realized. But more than that, it was a love story, pure and simple. Two people who found each other against the odds, who chose each other every single day, and who built a life that mattered. And that, in the end, was all that really mattered. Not the size of the ranch or the number of cattle or the money in the bank. What mattered was that they loved each other completely, worked together tirelessly, and left behind a family that knew the value of both. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and created something that would last long after they were gone. It had all started because a cowboy found her teaching herself to rope, fixed her technique, and praised her dedication. From that simple act of kindness and belief had grown something magnificent, a love story, a family legacy, a life well lived. And in the mountains of Utah, on a ranch that had been built by two pairs of determined hands and sustained by generations of love, the story continued. Children were born, learned to rope and ride and work the land. Weddings were celebrated, losses were mourned, and through it all, the memory of Vincent and Molly remained. The couple who had started it all, who had shown everyone what was possible when two people truly committed to each other and to a dream. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on the land, still worked the cattle, still gathered on the porch in the evenings to watch the sunset paint the mountains gold. And when the young ones asked about family history, they were told the story of how their great-great-grandmother came to Utah, alone and afraid but determined, how she taught herself to rope despite not knowing what she was doing, and how their great-great-grandfather stopped to help and ended up falling in love. They were told about the hard work and the challenges overcome, about the dedication it took to build something from nothing, about the love that sustained two people through 50 years of marriage and gave rise to a family legacy that spanned more than a century. And always, the storytellers ended the same way, with the reminder that the Calloways were strong because Vincent and Molly had been strong, that they were successful because their ancestors had refused to quit, that they were loved because they had learned from two people who loved each other completely and taught their children to do the same. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations, changing and adapting, but never losing sight of the values that had created it: hard work, dedication, partnership, love. These were the gifts Vincent and Molly Calloway had given their descendants, and these were the principles that continued to guide the family more than a century after that first day in the corral. In the end, their story was not just about ranching or the American West, or even about love, though it was certainly about all those things. It was about the power of human connection, about what becomes possible when two people see each other truly and commit to building something together. It was about the courage to take risks, the strength to keep going when things get hard, and the wisdom to recognize that the greatest treasures in life are not things, but relationships. Vincent Calloway found Molly Anderson teaching herself to rope on a September afternoon in 1882. He fixed her technique and praised her dedication. And from that simple beginning grew a love story that lasted a lifetime and created a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a story of the Wild West, but it was also a timeless story, one that reminded everyone who heard it that love, real love, is built not on grand gestures but on daily choices, on showing up and working together and believing in each other. And somewhere, perhaps, in whatever comes after this life, Vincent and Molly still stood together, watching over the land and the family they had created, smiling at everything they had built and everything their love had made possible. Together, as they had always been, as they would always be, partners in work and in love, for time and for eternity. Their story was complete, a full and beautiful circle from beginning to end, and it lived on in the hearts and lives of everyone who came after them. A testament to the power of dedication, the strength of partnership, and the enduring nature of true love. The end.